Welcome to Military Analytics. In the war between Ukraine and Russia, swords are coming out of their scabbards as temperatures rise. Tensions on the southern Ukrainian front lines are at their peak again as the clashes flare up. Described as the most strategic center of the war, the Crimean peninsula has been at the center of clashes for a long time. Crimea is now the primary target of the Ukrainian armed forces for the checkmate move of the chess strategy reconstructed by Kiev. Therefore, critical moves such as explosions, mysterious attacks of unknown origin, and drone attacks on the peninsula began again. Most recently, we witnessed another striking series of drone attacks on the Crimean peninsula in the last week. Airstrikes were carried out 3 times on the port of Sevastopol and near the Kerch Bridge. The attack target was the Russian oil depots and the naval headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. All these attacks were perhaps one of the most violent events since the beginning of the war. Simultaneously with the attacks, unidentified drones carried out 2 airstrikes on Moscow, the capital of Russia. In addition, explosions occurred in fuel tanks, ports and military airports in at least 10 regions in many cities of Russia. These attacks were touted as a flare of Ukraine's upcoming major offensive. The most striking of these attacks was the huge explosions in the Crimea. An oil tank in the Cossack Bay in Sevastopol, the target of the first attack in Crimea, turned into a blazing inferno. The second airstrike worried the Kremlin even more. The target of the second airstrike was the port of Taman, near the strategically important Kerch Strait Bridge connecting Russia with Crimea. The huge oil depot in Taman port burned with wild flames early yesterday morning. Regarding the first attack in the Cossack Bay in Sevastopol, the Ukrainian Military Secret Service claims that 10 oil tanks with a capacity of 40,000 tons were rendered unusable in the attack. This figure is a very serious loss for Russia. The Kiev administration did not take responsibility for this attack, but in the statement made by the Military Secret Service, it was stated that similar explosions will continue on the peninsula from now on. On the other hand, Ukrainian Southern Operational Command spokesperson Natalia Humaniuk stated that after the explosions in the city of Sevastopol in the Russian-occupied Crimea, Russian warships were afraid to enter Sevastopol. It is stated that Russian warships have been stopping at Novorossiysk port more often than Sevastopol for resupply in recent days. Ship groups currently consist of 10 ships and they are maneuvering in the area they think is safe for now. Closer to the southeast coast of the Crimea and the Black Sea, as dispersed as possible are the armed drone attacks of the Ukrainian army against the Crimea, harbinger of the Great Offensive. Let's take a look at the details of the major attacks in Crimea and the signs of a major offensive by Ukraine. In the attack in the Cossack Bay, the pro-Russian Sevastopol governor of Crimea, Mikhail Roswelhadjiyev, reported that a large oil storage facility was hit by a drone. Tanks caught fire after a suspected drone attack hit a fuel tank in the port city of Sevastopol, causing an explosion. We can say that the large flames that emerged after the explosion revealed the magnitude of the event, stating that a fire broke out in the facility as a result of the attack. Roswelhadjiyev stated that 4 tanks were damaged. Governor Roswelhadjiyev has not yet given clear information about injuries during the fire, which is currently managed by local firefighters and emergency services. In fact, Roswelhadjiyev added that due to the significant amount of fuel, it may take some time to completely control the fire due to the large volume of fuel. It was a concern that no conclusion could be drawn about the extent of the fire and damage. When the studies on the incident are completed, the picture that will emerge will be put as a target in front of the Russian people by Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. Russian leader Putin, who ordered that all the details of the explosion be presented, is very angry. While the Ukrainian authorities did not directly take responsibility for these attacks, they stated that they have the right to hit any target in response to Russia's aggression. It is stated that civilian structures other than the fuel tank were not damaged in the attack. The massive drone attack near the Kerch Bridge took place a few days after the explosion in Cossack Bay. It turned out that a Russian oil depot located near the tragically important Kerch Strait Bridge, which connects Russia with Crimea, burned down in the early hours of the past few days. Veniamin Kondratiev, the governor of the Krasnodar region in the south of Russia, reported the striking news in a statement on the Telegram channel. Veniamin Kondratiev stated that an oil storage tank caught fire in the village of Volna, near the port of Taman, and the fire was classified as the highest degree of difficulty. Volyn is Russia's only land link with the illegally annexed peninsula of Crimea. Also, this city is located near the Kerch Strait Bridge, which is an important supply route for Russian forces in the midst of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Therefore, this situation may disrupt the connection and logistics of Crimea and Ukraine for Russia. On the other hand, Russia's state news agency TASS reported that the fire was caused by a drone crash. Videos of the fire spread rapidly on Russian and Ukrainian social media, showing a large flame and huge black smoke rising into the sky. Local news channel CHP Sevastopol stated in Telegram that the fire was seen from the Kerch Strait Bridge. Anton Gerashenko, one of the advisors to the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, announced that 5 fire engines were working to put out the fire. According to Gerashenko's statements, the size of the fire was seriously large. On the other hand, Gerashenko suggested that the fire could be part of Ukraine's preparations for the upcoming offensive. But for now, Ukrainian authorities have not claimed responsibility for the fire. Weakening the enemy's logistics is an essential part of preparations for counterattack operations. Maybe Gerashenko is right, and the Ukrainian forces are now targeting Volyn for finishing moves. As we can see, the intensity of attacks on oil depots and logistics is increasing. There is a resource weakening of the Russian armed forces at this point. Ukraine continues to receive the support of the West to take its offensive plans to a much higher level. The Ukrainian armed forces aims to recapture the lands occupied by Russia with the counterattack, which will be organized with the support of weapons from the West. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that in addition to more than 1,550 armored vehicles, 230 tanks, and other equipment, Ukraine's allies have sent large quantities of ammunition, as well as training and equipping more than 9 new Ukrainian brigades. This will put Ukraine in a strong position by continuing to retake the occupied territories, Stoltenberg told reporters in Brussels. In addition, Stoltenberg stated that 31 NATO allies are determined to support the Ukrainian army, adding that retaking the territory occupied by Kremlin forces would give Kiev a stronger negotiating position if peace talks take place. In addition, NATO countries put their navies on high alert after the sabotage plan of Putin's ships was detected. The Swedish and Finnish navies have expressed concern about potential Russian sabotage of power grids after a Russian spy ship was spotted. The observation of Russian warships near submarine cables and wind farms in the Baltic has put the Swedish and Finnish navies on high alert. According to reports in the Finnish media, Swedish Navy Commander Ewa Skog Haslam warned of possible sabotage against the power grids of Russia's NATO allies in the region. On the other hand, we can say that it's a matter of curiosity how successful Putin's steps on how to defend against the big Ukrainian offensive that is approaching step by step. But Russia has lost a significant amount of power, and it's predicted that soon the Ukrainian army will seize the advantage, as in the areas previously liberated from Russian occupation in Kiev, Kharkiv, Balaklia, and Kupiansk. It is not clear exactly when this will happen, but Ukraine seems to be the winner in the end of this war. The reason for this is Russia's record military losses as a result. Putin will have to give up his stubbornness and put an end to this madness. If Russia does not want to go back to the old Soviet times, Russian leader Vladimir Putin made the biggest mistake of his political career by starting a war in Ukraine. Putin's country has now completely turned into a fireplace due to the war in Ukraine. Unbelievable attacks, explosions, and interesting situations of unknown origin are experienced in Russian cities close to the Ukrainian border line and in all the regions located in the depths or central parts of Russia. In recent days, much more activity has been observed in Russian cities close to the border lines between Ukraine and Russia. These cities include Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk. Surprise explosions that took place in the same city in the past days brought Bryansk to the forefront of these 3 Russian cities. Let's witness the mysterious and striking explosions that took place in the city of Bryansk. Loud explosions were heard at a military airport in the Bryansk region. According to authorities, the airport was attacked by unidentified drones in the N-1-4 transport aircraft, which was decommissioned as a result of the explosion, and other elements were severely damaged. However, there is no official information about the full-scale state of emergency in the city yet. The inhabitants of the city were now fed up with such negative situations, and most of the citizens here had left the city. Worrying situations continued to occur in Bryansk, where the tension was at its peak due to the effects of the striking explosions. In addition to the explosions at the city's airport, a freight train derailed in another massive explosion in the Bryansk region. This striking act of sabotage resulted in a turbo fire. Russian Railways press service reported that a locomotive and 7 wagons of a freight train were derailed in the explosion. The train consisted of 60 wagons. In total, 2 tanks were filled with kerosene to avoid possible risks. Russian authorities suspended train traffic in the Novorossiysk section. The Russian railway company described the cause of the explosion as the interference of unauthorized persons in the railway transport business. Extraordinary security measures were taken in the region after the dramatic situation in Bryansk. Rail assault groups continued to issue instructions on sabotage on the railway in the Russian Federation. The Russian authorities had taken extraordinary security measures to prevent another possible sabotage action, but Bryansk was still in a dangerous position as the anti-war sabotage groups and partisans in Ukraine were in large numbers. Only one day after the last explosion in the city, what was accepted came true, and another critical situation occurred near Bryansk in Russia. 20 cars of a freight train derailed due to the collapse of the railway line. This explosion was the second state of emergency to occur on Russian railways in the region in just 2 days. The train, which was going downhill when the rail was blown up, was carrying dangerous chemicals. It was claimed that the chemicals carried by the train were propane, sulfur, saltpeter, and lime. Although there was no fire, the Russian Emergencies Ministry was trying to cool the derailed wagons and spills. According to local media reports, the city of Bryansk had almost drawn a black curse on itself. The explosions were incessant. Russian leader Vladimir Putin and many Russian local officials could not understand these explosions. This explosion news was remarkably commented by some Russian mill bloggers. According to the allegations made, the Ukrainian forces had secretly smuggled agents into Russia and concentrated on sabotage action from the first days of May. These allegations could not be officially confirmed, but the city of Bryansk was described as a critical zone after all these explosions. But all these measures could not prevent the explosions in the city. Russian leader Vladimir Putin could not remove the curse placed on Bryansk, and even no Russian local official could prevent such mysterious and gigantic explosions in the city. Did the Ukrainian armed forces begin their big counterattack plans with cross-border operations using partisan sabotage groups? These explosions that took place in the Russian city of Bryansk were not limited to the city. This time, the address of tension was St. Petersburg, the city where Putin was born. Explosions occurred in a military airspace area in St. Petersburg. These striking explosions, which occurred near the airport in the southern suburbs of the city, were also felt in the settlement of Kirovskaya Slavyanka in the Gatchina district. Possible causes for the explosion are thought to be negativities at the nearby Pushkin military airfield, which is used by the National Guard and other Russian military structures. Moscow media announced that the Russian police, the National Guard, and the Ministry of Emergencies controlled the airspace, but no significant evidence was found. At the explosion site, the head of the Pushkinsky district refused to comment on the incident and advised media representatives to contact the press service. This incredible series of explosions in Russia infuriated Russian leader Vladimir Putin, according to some important intelligence reports. Putin will put the Russian Air Force on the stage in response to these stunning explosions in Russia. Since Putin's retaliatory plans are notorious, the possibility that the Russian Air Force will become much more active on Putin's orders should be considered. The Russian Air Force may have performed poorly at the start of the war in Ukraine, but intelligence leaks last month showed the United States was nervous about the prospect of Vladimir Putin returning to the sky to change what's going on the ground. The Pentagon document revealed that missiles for the Soviet era S-300 and Buk air defense medium to long-range systems, which Ukraine relied on early to target aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles could be completely exhausted by this month. Ukrainian air defense has been weakened by Moscow's constant attacks on infrastructure, with cruise missiles launched from Russian soil and Iranian-made kamikaze drones. In contrast, Putin may have shelved the assets of his country's air force, but the Russian Air Force is still seen as the second largest military power in the world. And the Russian Air Force includes about 900 fighter jets and 120 bombers. These figures represent a significant risk that must be kept ahead of the widely anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive. If the Mikoyan MiG-35, Sukhoi Su-35, and Sukhoi Su-57I in the Russian army include large Ukrainian tanks and armored personnel vehicles that do not have sufficient air coverage, a possible future counteroffensive by Kiev may be hampered. Pentagon officials have suggested that urgent measures are needed, especially if Russian planes become more free to attack ground troop positions and important artillery targets. Mark Kansian, senior advisor to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, noted that Ukraine can defend its military forces with the remaining air defense, but not its cities or infrastructure. Kansian stressed that Russia has so far avoided risk in the air and therefore does not expect the Russian Air Force to hover over the Ukrainian skies anytime soon. In the long run, if the Ukrainians do not have more air defense assets, then they can gradually use the air superiority of the Russians. However, it will take a long time before the fighter jets and UAVs of the Russian Air Force can fly comfortably over Ukraine, and the Russians don't have that many cruise missiles. Therefore, the realization of the menacing aims of the Russians seems a little difficult. On the other hand, the Ukrainian army continues to make serious breakthroughs in air defense systems. The Biden administration announced in April that it would send additional air defense interceptors and munitions to Ukraine as part of a $2.6 billion aid package, some of which will aid Kiev's counterattack preparations. As part of this U.S.-provided package, Ukraine will receive 4 Patriot batteries. The $4 million price tag each missile carries makes them suitable for defense against the cheap drones that are wreaking havoc on Ukrainian cities. In short, all these efforts of Russian leader Vladimir Putin seem to be ineffective, thanks to air defense systems and other military aid packages sent to the Ukrainian army. The biggest news comes from Crimea. Here, Ukrainians targeted a massive oil depot near the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. In the aftermath of a successful attack, Ukrainians destroyed 10 oil reservoirs that together contained 40,000 tons of fuel. The square area of the fire reached up to 1,000 meters squared, and the firefighters ascended the highest degree of difficulty and were unable to stop the fire until most of the fuel burned away. It was reported that there were no casualties. In order to conduct such a strike, Ukrainians used several swarms of drones. The attack was carried out immediately after the improvement of weather conditions as the anticyclone moved away from the western coast of the Crimean peninsula. The drones were launched at night and departed from the Odessa region. Russian sources claimed that there were at least 10 drones, 9 of which were reportedly taken down by various methods such as electronic warfare systems, self-propelled air defense systems, and small arms. Russian sources also claimed that only 1 drone managed to hit the target, setting the oil tank on fire. This means that the firefighters were either late or failed to stop the fire from spreading, causing a huge fire and complete destruction of all reservoirs. Interestingly, Ukrainians used cheap Chinese drones, which they manually equipped with explosives. The fire caused another wave of migration as thousands of people started leaving Crimea for fear of being directly or indirectly affected by the constantly increasing drone attacks and missile strikes. And this is not surprising. As you remember, several days ago, Ukrainians conducted another drone attack on Sevastopol and hit some facilities near the harbor. There are also numerous unsuccessful drone attacks, such as today's drone attack on Yevpatoria and Novorossiysk. Even though the goal of these 2 strikes was to divert the attention of the air defense operators, it also destabilized the situation on the peninsula by causing social unrest. However, this is only the beginning. Another fire broke out today on the only Russian factory that produces multiple launch rocket systems. There were around 40 people and 10 fire trucks involved in putting out the fire. The fire started because something happened to the substation, and as a result, the factory became temporarily inoperable, which exacerbated the strain on the artillery. Another fire today broke out in the industrial zone in Nizhny Novgorod. The fire broke out near the fuel storage, and as a result, 3 petrol tankers and the nearby trucks were turned to ashes. Today, Ukrainians also conducted a hammer strike on a certain Russian military base. The details from the Ukrainian side are yet unavailable, but the Russian side published a video showing a demolished building. The video was filmed from the roof because the explosion threw the person on the roof carcass, and the person somehow managed to survive. 2 days ago, Ukrainians conducted another HIMARS raid targeting the areas of concentration of Russian forces in Opytn. The losses are likely very high because this is a very convenient prefrontal group of high-rise houses, and Ukrainians also targeted several buildings simultaneously, not allowing the enemy to evacuate after the first strike. 4 days ago, the spokeswoman for the Ukrainian Southern Group of Forces reaffirmed that the counteroffensive operation is already undergoing and very slowly gaining momentum. She stated that they understand that they are facing a powerful enemy and therefore are not inclined to rush with large-scale actions. She said that in turn, right now they are focused on undermining the power of their enemy. And judging by the latest developments, Ukrainians are set to turn Russian logistics into a nightmare. Continuous efforts at the destruction of newly arrived ammunition, strikes on critical connections of ground lines of communication, disruptions of supplies, targeting of military headquarters, and forcing Russians to disperse their air defense already allowed Ukrainians to set proper conditions for large-scale maneuver warfare several times. And it looks like it is starting to happen once again.